Welcome to the J&B Talk F1 podcast. It's the week of the Italian Grand Prix. It's round 12 of the Formula One season, and there's a lot to discuss on this afternoon's edition, not least what will happen throughout the weekend. We'll also take a look at Renault, their future. There's been a lot made of that in recent days and weeks. Still really no closer to an outcome there, but there's been plenty of conjecture. We'll also take another look at the silly season, which is evolving now on the back of Kimi Raikkonen's retention by Ferrari, and there's a few other rumours circulating which ties in with the Enstone predicament. We'll also discuss Audi and Dr. Wolfgang Ulrich, who's made a few interesting statements. So has Joe Sayward in relation to an incident which occurred in the DTM a few weeks back now. We're also going to have a new segment for the first time today. We'll be dissecting and analysing some quotes which have been made throughout the past week, and that there are some interesting ones indeed to consider on this occasion. And not least, nostalgia straight. Of course, it's got to be to do with Monza. There's always something famous that happens here, and we're going to look back at some of the most memorable moments, especially related to Ferrari throughout their rich history. Anyway, as ever, I'm Baden Westerweller. I'm once again joined by Jawad Yacoub. How are you today?
Very well, thanks. Good to be here, and let's get into it. The Italian Grand Prix.
Yes, without further ado, plenty to discuss. 53 laps comprises this event as ever at 5.7 kilometre circuits, high speed, and of course it's always a sight when you see those rear wings deployed to the most minimal in terms of the lowest downforce. It's quite something compared to all the other slow speed circuits. And for the tyres, do you want to run us through the compounds?
Yeah, sure, but just first on the downforce, this is for the entire season, this is probably the only circuit that the teams have a unique package. They work all year just for one race, the Monza race, the lowest downforce they run all season, and we'll see some pretty amazing top speeds as well. But yeah, with the tyres, we've got the soft and medium compounds returning, the same compounds that were used a fortnight ago at the Belgian Grand Prix, to much controversy with the blowout that occurred with Sebastian Vettel on the penultimate lap of the race, and then also Nico Rosberg during free practice too. So Pirelli have, after that problem, gone and done an investigation, and they're set to disclose the results of what came of that investigation during the week, across the weekend. So we'll see. But yeah, there was calls for perhaps changing the compounds, but it seems like they're sticking with the soft and medium. So we'll just have to see what happens.
Absolutely, and one would hope nothing does eventuate, because then there really will be quite a few concerned faces around the paddock. Anyway, Mercedes, who else would be the favourites this weekend? Last year they walked it, really. We had those scenes with Nico Rosberg handing victory, of course, to Lewis Hamilton, but it was a canter nevertheless. And really, it's, speaking of the German there, he's a new father. We should mention that off the top. He and his partner, his wife, have now got a beautiful baby daughter there, and obviously that was a fair bit of tension for him heading into Belgium when that birth would occur. So now he can get his mind back onto racing, because of course he now trails Lewis Hamilton by 28 points. So it really is now or never. We say this most weekends these days, but if ever there's a moment where he needs to break through and hope for Lewis to suffer some kind of misfortune, it's this weekend.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we've said on previous weekends, it's not, about Lewis suffering misfortunes or any kind of hardships. It's Rosberg has to try and beat him on track. And the thing he said coming out this weekend for Monza is that he needs to get pole position first. And that's something that he had the advantage over Lewis last season. But this season, Hamilton's just handed it on a plate. Pretty much with 10 pole positions to Rosberg's 1.
Yeah, well, Hamilton's already sewed up the pole position trophy for this year. We're only just over halfway through the season, so such is his dominance on Saturdays, and clearly that was his weakness last season, which he's now rectified, and as a result, he really is the one calling the shots.
Indeed, and as you said earlier as well, 12 months ago at this race, Rosberg had a few mistakes, a few errors during this race where he locked up going into the first chicane, and that, as a result, ended up handing the lead to Hamilton, and subsequently he went on a 4-5 race winning streak. and Rosberg has to make sure that that is negated, and the first thing he can do is win here, because the next few circuits we go to, Singapore, Japan, and then even Russia, they're circuits that Hamilton has a rich history. Even well, Russia's relatively new, but Hamilton was the one to take victory there last season, so it is crucial for Rosberg. I mean, sure, it's 28 points difference in the championship, but unless he wins races, it's going to be difficult for this championship to come back in his favour.
Of course, and Lewis Hamilton, with that victory last season, it was his second victory at Monza, joining Fernando Alonso, who also, of course, we'll discuss later on his famous victory for Ferrari. But Sebastian Vettel is the most prevalent victor on the current grid at the moment, with 3 from 2008. Who can forget that infamous afternoon in the rain in the Toro Rosso, the phoenix from the ashes, which was Minardi, and that really is a moment which will not be forgotten anytime soon. As well, though, 2011 and 2013, he took out the trophy. Indeed,
and speaking of Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari, of course, is there going to be anything for the Tifosi to be happy about this weekend? And Ferrari reckon that the win is out of the question, as it seems. And we said on a high-speed circuit with the lowest downforce possible, Mercedes are still the winners. But a podium couldn't be out of a podium still could be possible for the red team.
Yeah, they'd be hard pressed not to be happy with a third place as the maximum, unless we do see more shenanigans as we did at Hungary. No one predicted that, and then look what happened. It was a dominance from the Reds, and that would be something, especially for Sebastian Vettel, his debut race in Italy, after he has won many times in Red Bull and been scorned, you must say, due to some of his acrimonious little manoeuvres he did make throughout those campaigns. So it will be interesting to see what kind of a response he elicits if it does come to pass.
Yeah, exactly. The Tifosi really has embraced Sebastian Vettel this season, which isn't something we would say when he was at Red Bull. But now that he is in Red, he is sort of the favourite son, and yeah, we'll keep an eye out on Ferrari. Anything is possible, especially at their home race. We have seen some special races from them in the past, and it'll be especially special for Vettel after what happened in Belgium, where he had the penultimate lap tyre blowout to come back and get back on the podium. But what about Williams? Can they make up for the torrid outings that they've had in the last 2 races? Hungary may be a long time ago, but who can forget, they scored no points there. Spa, they had problems with pit stop with Valtteri Bottas. I mean, as laughable as that was, it is a serious concern that what's going down there. And then Felipe Massa had a bad start as well. So on a circuit that should suit them, like Belgium did, are they going to come back? Are they going to get a podium?
We can't even discount going even further back to Britain, when that was their realistic choice to do something great, and they really have sabotaged themselves now 3 weekends consecutively. So this is the weekend where, if they want to have any chance of really being that clear third place in the standings, they need to get it right this weekend. And who knows, it's a track which could come into their strong suits, but based on Belgium and the shenanigans there, it's a long road back for them. And really, they have slipped a fair way from that promise which they had been showing around that Austria time, when they seem to have turned a corner.
Yeah, they had 2 podiums back-to-back, Canada and Austria, and then sort of just let that slip come their home race at Silverstone. But the problem is now that there's guys behind them that are starting to get a bit stronger. We've seen Force India as well. Sergio Perez finished 4th in Belgium. It was unfortunate that Nico Hülkenberg has had 2 consecutive retirements, but now that he's been re-signed by the team for a further 2 years, as we'll discuss a little later, he'll be looking to get some solid results in the remaining races. And Lotus, who can forget Lotus and the podium that they had with Romain Grosjean in Spa? We've said that the Lotus car has been quick all season. It's just that they've had a lot of bad luck and a lack of development due to the financial problems that they have been suffering. So Grosjean actually said that after the Spa race, that their car is better suited to Monza than Spa. So perhaps, another podium could be not out of the question for them.
It's all good and well to forecast that they could have even greater prospects this weekend, but the first hurdle which they need to pass is a clearance to even participate this weekend. Of course, we saw them withheld from leaving the Spa paddock a fortnight ago. Obviously, they've been cleared now, but they could still reach the Monza paddock and find themselves, unless they've cleared up the situation and had some kind of announcement made that is going to acquire their operation, that they mightn't be permitted to race. So it's all really contingent on this, and we hope in the next 24 to 48 hours there will be some solution there, because it would be a great shame coming hot on the heels of their real breakthrough with Grosjean that we did see in the Ardennes Forest. Anyway,
Yeah,
do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, just going to say that I have got news that the trucks are on their way to Monza now, the Lotus team trucks, so they will indeed race, and that's all what we want to see. We want to see everyone racing, and we want them to get some good results, especially considering their future is still questionable. But we'll talk a bit more about Renault and Lotus soon.
Absolutely. And the final point to do with this weekend, of course, Mr. Asucia Arai-san, as you can label him, the head of the Honda operation in conjunction with McLaren. He's come out again boasting of their forecast for future improvements. He's now said that the Japanese marque enjoys a 25 bhp advantage over Renault, despite the hardships which they have suffered throughout the campaign. Of course, the widely vaunted upgrades for Belgium really didn't achieve anything at all for McLaren. And on that note, Fernando Alonso is now bracing himself for more pain.
Indeed, and it's interesting that Arai-san makes these claims, and this is probably the circuit. I mean, we've seen McLaren and Honda have some pretty bad races this season, Canada being one of them, and then also Spa as well, where we thought, yeah, sure, the upgrades that they brought will perhaps elevate them a little, but it didn't seem to get them anywhere. And this is probably the most, the highest speed circuit of the season, where power is everything. And if they're still having problems with their power unit, then, as you said, Alonso was already bracing for more pain, so it'll be difficult to see. But the next event we go to Singapore after Monza, we'll probably see them a little bit more stronger, as it's not as power dependent, low speed circuit, what have you. But yeah, it's just at this point in the season, it's very difficult to comprehend that they're still just using each race as a glorified test session. But we'll see how they go over the weekend.
Absolutely, and that's probably all we've got to discuss for the time being. Of course, we'll be back on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening with a qualifying debrief and any other announcements which do occur in the meantime. But of course, this Renault Enstone acquisition, it's been lingering now for a long time. There's been a lot of bluster coming throughout the media, yet no definitive confirmation that any kind of moves are going to proceed. Autosport's quite prevalent in making this announcement, essentially, that there will be some kind of outcome throughout this week, yet nothing official. And they have reported that pretty much 2/3 of the operation, being 65%, will be acquired by the French marque, with Gerard Lopez and Gini remaining in some kind of shape, 25% share, whilst Alain Prost will take a nice little 10% cut, with this notion that he would serve in a role equivalent to that of Niki Lauda as this non-executive chairman. And they're even touting the four-time champion, perhaps fronting the operation as a team principal.
Yeah, so Alain Prost, obviously ambassador with Renault at the moment, and this might be the first time, if he does end up getting the team principal's role, this isn't the first time that we'll see him as the boss of a team. Who can forget his ill-fated,
Yes.
His ill-fated operation under his own name back in the late 90s and whatever. But yeah, a lot has been said about Renault and Lotus and how it's going to be the right fit. Lotus, supposedly they have more up-to-date facilities, which has been stated for the reason for Renault's decision to go for Enstone, say, over Force India's Silverstone base. I mean, they have more up-to-date CFD and wind tunnel facilities than Force India do currently at their Silverstone base. So it seems that Force India are going to remain as they are with their Mercedes deal.
Nevertheless, there has been a little bit of conjecture going around that Force India could indeed still become a customer of Renault, depending on what does occur with the Red Bull. There's still this debate whether they will have their contract for 2016 with Renault on it, or whether they will jump ship to a Mercedes, which has triggered a lot of debate.
Yeah, and this is the one thing that probably is going to be important when we find out that Renault has paired up with Lotus or Enstone, is what's going to happen with Red Bull for the next season. Now, Red Bull's contract with Renault goes to the end of 2016, and it's strictly a works agreement. So does this mean that Renault will continue their agreement with Red Bull to the end of next year as a works supplier, and continue using their Lotus's current deal with Mercedes-Benz for another season before they decide to make a fully fledged thing?
Get your head around that, ladies and gentlemen. We'll have Renault as the operation with all the support, yet they'll have Mercedes three-pointed star power.
Exactly. Oh, well, as you said last week, they have a road car partnership anyway, so it's probably not, it won't look as strange, I guess.
Well, it could always, we have discussed in the past, having a bit of lead time to put all their resources towards 2017, which would coincide, unless things change with the new regulations. Perhaps they're going to throw everything towards that effort and just really make sure that the next season they're not sort of coming in really too late to the party.
Well, yeah, but also if they are going to honour their agreement with Red Bull to the end of next year, then surely Red Bull are going to demand a more efficient and more powerful power unit for the next season. So I guess a lot of work will go into next year as well. But at the same time, perhaps, they could even agree a trade with Red Bull to pick up the existing contract with Mercedes-Benz that Lotus have, and we can have Red Bull, Mercedes, and then our Renault Works team. But then where would that leave Toro Rosso? Will Toro Rosso stay with Renault, which seems more likely? Or would Toro Rosso go to perhaps a Ferrari or even a Mercedes?
They were a long-time client of Ferrari. Of course, Sebastian Vettel achieved that individual victory for the Faenza squad using Ferrari power. So it would be logical, and this ties in as well with these reports that Max Verstappen is being very keenly eyed by Ferrari. So a season in association with them could be quite a logical outcome.
Yeah, exactly. And another point to make as well with the Venezuelan oil giant PDVSA, what did you have to say regarding that?
Pretty much just reports going on there that these debates between Vieri and Enstone are really holding up the PDVSA's invoices coming through, which is really the string which ties Pastor Maldonado to the outfit. So whether this, ultimately when Renault does make this acquisition, which we can expect to happen, it looks like the Venezuelan conglomerate, you could call them, will cease to partner Lotus, but nevertheless they have been dependent to the Enstone operation on these funds. And we did as well here, just quickly, reports of Bernie Ecclestone having to foot the bill for the staff members just to cover the shortfalls which have resulted from this notion. And really does just tie in this whole matter. It's quite complicated as well. PDVSA and Total being a French national company as well, they've got close ties to Renault.
Yeah, so it's unlikely that if Renault do take over, that PDVSA will remain. Perhaps, as we've touted last week, that perhaps PDVSA and along with that Pastor Maldonado could go to Force India, and then Sergio Perez could perhaps come to Renault. The money that Maldonado will take away with PDVSA from Lotus can be easily brought in by Sergio Perez and his Mexican sponsors. But we'll talk about that now with an update on the silly season, and the likeliness of Renault's return to the grid has opened up another juicy seat, with the likeliness that Romain Grosjean will stay with the Total backing and being a French driver and whatnot. That would be good. But Sergio Perez is pretty high on their radar as well, and his sponsors, Perez's sponsors in Claro and Telmex, could fill the void that PDVSA leaves if Maldonado is given the sack. And we said that, Maldonado could end up at Force India, but Mercedes-Benz is apparently pushing for their reserve driver Pascal Wehrlein to have a drive next season. And Verline, he's tested with Force India, and they're definitely going to be getting behind him to have a seat perhaps at Force India next season. So a bit of competition there for Maldonado if he doesn't see himself at Lotus next season. But you said to me before we came on there that they could perhaps honour his 2016 contract.
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one, even if Peter Visa does end up being withdrawing from their sponsorship, at least for Renault, maybe on more of a personal level for Maldonado. He could still find himself with a deal to remain at Enstone for another 12, even 24 months, as unlikely as that would be. But we'll have to see what water passes under the bridge in the coming days. But also just quickly on Pascal Wehrlein, as you mentioned, there's a lot of talk as well that Manor could tie up with Mercedes, and in that case, that could be the destination for the young German to see his apprenticeship on the grid.
Indeed, and Wehrlein at the moment is competing in DTM, but along with Wehrlein, we have said that there are quite a few contenders looking to get in there. Jolyon Palmer as well. We've said Stoffel Vandoorne, who's currently tearing up the GP2 series. And then we said Wehrlein now, Kevin Magnussen, who's been out for a season. Where are they all going to end up? And we know now that Nico Hülkenberg has signed on for another 2 seasons with Force India, so good to see that he's actually nailed down a seat, even though it may not have been a top seat.
Well, it does seem as well in conjunction with this renewal that he will be returning to defend his Le Mans title. There were reports overnight that Porsche are very keen to have him back alongside Nick Tandy and Albamba there to get the job done once more.
Indeed, and that's good for, I guess it's good for Hülkenberg, and perhaps, we don't know what the likely destination for Force India is at the moment, whether they're going to continue lingering around the midfield or perhaps even go up to being podium contenders or whatever. But at least Hülkenberg has the option to go race another series and get more success around there, even if he's not going to get success in Formula One. But it's just hard to believe how he has yet to get a podium, even though he's been with Force India for quite some time. I mean, we look at his teammate at the moment, Perez, in his first season for Force India, Bahrain Grand Prix last year, he was on the podium, and Hülkenberg missed out. Then the reason for Hülkenberg switching to Sauber in 2013 was on the account of the success that they had the previous year. Sergio Perez claimed 3 or 4 podiums that season. Kobayashi got that maiden podium as well at his home race, and that ultimately persuaded Hülkenberg to go to Sauber. And then when he goes to Sauber, they had a lackluster season.
Well, who knows? With Force India, these long-touted upgrades, which did come in during that Silverstone phase and beyond, they have shown these inroads. So we could see that breakthrough rostrum outing for Hülkenberg at any of the remaining events.
Potentially, and that'll be something to keep our eyes on. But going back to Kevin Magnussen too, I mean, he seems pretty desperate now to have a drive for 2016. He said that it's either he has a drive or he goes and races elsewhere in a different series. And this could also mean that he might cut ties with McLaren to make himself a more attractive free agent to other teams, and perhaps even get himself onto the Haas F1 team shopping list. Now that Hülkenberg is out of the picture, perhaps he could be in contention along with Jean-Eric Vergne or Esteban Gutierrez, Alex Rossi, another one to mention.
Well, he's already got that season where he didn't really do a lot wrong. It was just unfortunate that he was discarded because of the Honda coming on board once again with McLaren. They wanted that real experience factor, but nevertheless, he does have that season there. And for someone like Haas, they've clearly got that desire to have someone who's really achieved a few good results. And also another factor that has been reported is he's very fluent in English, and this appeals well to the American market, which they do want to penetrate and get that real elusive fan base up and going after the hardships which it suffered in recent decades. But of course, Esteban Gutierrez has been considered as good as done with his array of sponsors in line with Ferrari to land at least one of those seats. And of course, also Jean-Eric Vergne, the other Ferrari simulator driver there. A lot's been made about him. And to the native Alex Rossi, he's someone who would carry a lot of credibility if he were to be given the seat.
Indeed, and Alex Rossi doing well in the GP2 series as well at the moment. But better than him at the moment, Stoffel Van Dorn. So where's he going to end up then? If it's still a big jigsaw puzzle that needs to be sorted out, and perhaps in the next few races we'll get a conclusion. We did report a few weeks ago that Haas was supposedly set to make a decision by the end of the summer. It is now the end of the European summer in September, where we've got spring here in Australia. Yippee! But yeah, it is the end of the summer now, so perhaps by Monza time, by this weekend, perhaps, with the Ferrari link, could they make an announcement as to who their drivers are? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I'd say sometime around, if not this weekend, around the Singapore Grand Prix weekend, we'll be getting at least one of those, if not both identities, a resolution to the outcome there, and that'll clear up again the silly season and make things a lot clearer.
Exactly, because they're that's the new team on the grid next year. 2 seats open, and once that is done, then perhaps everyone else will fall into place. But we said that after Kimi Raikkonen signing that, yeah, everyone will fall into place after that. But still, there's been a lot of conjecture. Hulkenberg's fallen into place now, but still we don't have an idea of where everyone else is going to fit in. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after the Haas seats are confirmed. But we'll move it on now.
Yeah, well, Audi, it's the perennial question which never seems to disappear. It's back in some shape or form at the moment, in conjunction with the boss of the operation there, Dr. Wolfgang Ulrich, who's pretty much announced that Audi will be going nowhere near the category anytime soon. And yet Joe Sayward, who we've taken to referring as Joe Savage of late because of some of his quite
He sounds like a Savage Joe, sounds like a character from a Hunter S. Thompson novel, but...
Yeah, well, he certainly isn't afraid to voice his own opinion, but he has raised this notion, which a rather sinister little accident, which did occur we should say, because it was a bit more to it than meets the eye, at the Red Bull ring, where the good Dr. Ulrich did inform his driver, Timo Scheider, essentially to take out the competition to enact a victory.
Yeah, it was Pascal Wehrlein involved in that incident as well.
Yeah, well, as a result of this, we're seeing that it's at least Joe Sayward himself is forecasting that he could be asked to fall on his sword, Dr. Ulrich, and make his departure, and whether this would clear up the air for Audi, the younger executives there who are quite envious of a Mercedes' unparalleled success at the moment. They want a slice of this action, and they might make their own call based on what goes on here. Of course, we saw Ferdinand Piech. He was opposed to mostly Bernie Ecclestone, but he's gone now, and that was one hurdle cleared. So whether it's all just conjecture by Mr. Sayward or whether there is more to it, who knows?
Yeah, well, NBC Sports, over the 6 hours of Nürburgring race over the weekend, World Endurance Championship, they interviewed Dr. Ulrich, and they asked that perennial question about coming into F1, and he pretty much laughed it off, saying that this is a discussion that I've lived with for 20 years and we never did it. So he clearly doesn't seem interested at all in entering F1, and I guess in a sense I do agree with him. If the forecast isn't right for Audi to come into Formula One at the moment, then perhaps don't think about it. I mean, despite what Savage Joe says in that Ulrich has to retire over this radio fiasco in the DTM, Ulrich has been a pivotal piece in the Audi sports car program, and how much success they've had over the past, past decade or 2 decades or whatever. He saw Tom Christensen dominating Le Mans every year with Alan McNish, and then in recent times we've had the crew, Andre Lotterer, Marcel Fessler, and Benny Trudeau winning the World Endurance Championship. Then the Tom Christensen trio won the World Endurance Championship as well. They've won plenty of Le Mans as well. So he's clearly a pivotal piece. But if, as you said, the Audi board are interested in coming into F1 and they think that Ulrich is a hurdle, then perhaps something could be done. But if he has to go on the account of this, then it'll be a real shame to see him go, considering how much success he's brought the Audi operation in LMP1, certainly.
Absolutely. All tying in as well with this sports car talk. Hats off have to go to Mark Webber. He's achieved his breakthrough World Endurance Championship triumph, coming at the scene of none other than his maiden Formula One victory, which occurred in 2009 at the Nürburgring, and really it's a testament to his perseverance as well. He's had two up and down seasons. Who can forget that scary moment at the season finale last season at Sao Paulo? He came away from that thankfully unscathed, and of course he was second at Le Mans, so close yet so far. And now he's taken off another category where he can say that he had a victory.
Yeah, taking the monkey off the back, he has now. Brilliant drive between Brendan Hartley and Timo Bernhard. But I think I was watching it over the weekend. Saw at least half of it because it was went until 3 a.m. I couldn't be bothered staying up for the whole thing. But
where's the commitment?
No, never mind that. But it was just nice to see the Nürburgring track. Obviously this season it was scheduled to be on the F1 calendar, but then it was cancelled at the last moment due to them not being able to afford it. So it was nice to see the track again. In the WEC, they did interview quite a few fans trackside, and the fans were echoing the same thing, saying, we come here all the time to see whatever categories here, F1, DTM or GT racing, and this year we missed out on F1, but we're just happy that we have a high-profile race here. And I guess it's good for the Nürburgring also. Whether we're going to see the Nürburgring back on the F1 calendar is another question, but it's good that other categories getting good exposure in Germany. And Germany, we've talked about a number of times, they seem to not have as much interest in F1 as it is at the moment. They don't really relate to Nico Rosberg as being a German driver.
More of a Monegasque kind of
Mercedes-Benz, the team doesn't really have much ties to Germany except for name only, because the factories are all in the Great Britain. Nico Hülkenberg isn't really at the top yet. Sebastian Vettel, I guess, is probably as close as they can get to him. But there's a lot more German pride in the World Endurance Championship at the moment. Two really good marks in Audi and Porsche. A lot of German drivers as well. And I guess that comes back to the thing, if Audi enters F1, perhaps there'll be a renewed interest by German followers of motorsport for Formula One.
Yeah, we're just seeing that rivalry there really gets the juices flowing, and that could cross the sort of the bloodlines between those who are enthusiasts of Audi or those who are the three-pointed star loyalists. So it's something which really has to be taken into the consideration, especially in time for 2017, when these new regulations could entice a new manufacturer into the sport. Anyway, we've got a lot more to discuss, so we're going to move on to our new segment debuting this afternoon, titled rather professionally or not, They Said It. And this week we're going to be looking at some interesting quotes which were made by none other than the ex-McLaren team principal, Martin Whitmarsh, related to his ex-driver, Kimi Räikkönen. And not entirely surprising. Nevertheless, there's a fair bit which can be made of it. It was in the form of a motorsport piece by the famed Nigel Roebuck. In that, the first quote which we did see from Mr. Whitmarsh was reading along the lines of, "Although Kimi hates Ron with a passion, I always got on okay with him, and I was thinking of signing him again." That was at the end of 2009, but his management, they were a bit commercially ambitious, so that put paid to any chance of another collaboration between the Finn and McLaren, where he did come close on multiple occasions to securing that first title, which ultimately occurred in 2007, his first campaign with Ferrari. I don't know what you have to make of these quotes.
It's quite interesting. I mean, it has been a while since we've heard anything from Mr. Whitmarsh since his sacking at the end of the 2013 season by his former mentor, Ron Dennis. But it's good to see Whitmarsh has come out with some things that we didn't know in the past and whatnot. And I guess that's what happens once you move out of the F1 bubble. You can, as we saw with Mark Webber's autobiography as well, that you can open up a little bit more and talk about things that you couldn't before. And that's quite interesting that Kimi Räikkönen was on McLaren's, or certainly Whitmarsh's, radar to come back after his acrimonious stint at Ferrari that ended in 2009. So But as you said, his management were a bit commercially ambitious. So
well, as we saw, he went off to the Rally Championship for a couple of seasons and ultimately came back onto the grid with Lotus, and he has indeed made that a reprisal in the form of Ferrari, and we've now seen in the past week that he'll be doing a second stint of 3 seasons with the Italian marque before he potentially rides off into the sunset from the Formula One paddock for the final time. But there was another quote by this one a bit juicy, you could say, by Mr. Whitmarsh about Kimi. Do you want to elaborate?
Well, yeah, he says that Kimi is deeply frustrating in that, as smart as he is, it just pisses you off that he compromises it. He hasn't realised his potential, which is a great shame. So that's pretty big stuff coming from Mr. Whitmarsh about Kimi.
Well, he's won a title and 20 Grand Prix victories. It's not exactly as though he's just flopped and never had any kind of success. Yes, it never occurred with McLaren, but that was arguably not his problem. There are a lot of reliability issues during that time.
You remember, look back to, against Schumacher in the early 2000s, he could have snatched a title, and then ultimately those battles with Fernando Alonso in 2005 and 2006, Alonso in the Renault, and then Raikkonen in the McLaren,
I think his Raikkonen's tenure at McLaren can be epitomised by that infamous moment at the Nürburgring in 2005. Who could forget that final lap where that front left tyre spectacularly failed?
Ultimately gave out, and it was a bit of a shame, obviously, because there was plenty of expectation on Kimi after, obviously, Mika Häkkinen's retirement, the first flying Finn, and then they're suddenly bringing this fresh-faced young Finn in Kimi Räikkönen after 1 season at Sauber to McLaren, and immediately he's up there winning races and whatnot and fighting for championships, but ultimately the car just let him down, and the team let him down on several occasions.
And probably the final point, just running through it all again, was the notion that he and Ron hated each other. That's quite strong words from Martin, unless they started off quite fond of each other and it deteriorated rapidly before the conclusion of that partnership for 2007. But seems to be a bit of a recurring theme with Ron, you could make of it now. Lots of the drivers who go on to pastures and you do seem to have rather indifferent words to say about Ron. Even Ayrton Senna at the time didn't have the greatest end to their partnership. Alain Prost as well. Nigel Mansell, he and Ron were not made for each other, as he said.
They got along quite finely. He lasted
two races,
yeah.
And even Lewis, of course, they were like father and son initially. In the way that deteriorated.
Indeed. I mean, Lewis was like, the prodigy for McLaren going future, and I guess Martin Whitmarsh as well, in a sense, was a protege of Ron Dennis. He pretty much groomed him to become the figure that he was at McLaren, and ultimately he turfed him, and
ruthless game.
Ron turfed him and staged his own comeback in that executive role. But and then Fernando Alonso, who can forget 2007 and the what went on between Dennis and Alonso there, but now that Alonso's back at McLaren, I mean, can time heal all those wounds? We don't know.
Well, who knows? Maybe Lewis Hamilton could come full circle in a few seasons. He might decide he wants to come home if this Honda partnership with McLaren ever does take off the ground. But a lot of water to go under the bridge in the meantime. Anyway, we're going to press on. It's our final component of today's edition, Nostalgia Straight. Of course, it's very apt that we look at the rich collaboration between Ferrari and Monza. Who can forget some notable achievements, not least these drivers who have gone on to achieve a lot in varying degrees. Michael Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, both of them lifting the trophy at Monza for their first race in red, 2010 for Fernando Alonso, and 1996 going off that fair bit back for Michael Schumacher.
Yeah, that's amazing. In their first campaigns with the Scuderia, they win at the home of Ferrari, the home of Italian Motorsport, Monza. I guess for Schumacher, it was the start of a long-term successful partnership. For Alonso, things didn't pan out as quite as well. We saw that Schumacher went on to win 5 races at Monza with Ferrari, and he's the most successful driver at Monza. And then there was a period between, I think, 2002 and 2004 where Ferrari just dominated. Barrichello won a couple of races as well as Schumacher. So yeah, that early 2000s period when Ferrari were on top was certainly a good time for the Tifosi at Monza. But we look at Sebastian Vettel, he's in his first season with Ferrari. He won his first race with Ferrari at the second race of the season, but could he potentially win here? We've already detailed a little bit. We'll see come the weekend if he can win his first race with Ferrari at Monza. But let's not forget his first win in F1 came in a Ferrari-powered Toro Rosso back in 2008. So I guess that's a bit special. But even Vettel has alluded to many times that it's not the same unless you're wearing red. So I guess for someone who was booed on the podium 2 years ago for winning, will get a more heartier reception if he wins this time.
Well, an interesting notion, which does tie in that glorious afternoon for Toro Rosso. It was run at the time by none other than Gerhard Berger, who 20 years earlier had achieved a highly emotional victory, which came hot on the heels of the passing of the great forebearer to the name in Enzo Ferrari himself.
Indeed, and 88 was not a very strong season for Ferrari. We saw the McLaren domination that season, and there wasn't much competition from behind, but due to some circumstances that occurred during the race, a couple of retirements and then accidents as well, Berger was able to claim victory there. And it's quite funny. He said something crazy like, oh, if I win the race, can I have the car? Can I own the car? And Ferrari said, yeah, that's if you win the race, we'll give you your car. And look what happened. He ended up winning the race. So he actually owns that Ferrari from 1988 now in his personal collection. So very good. And it was also before, I guess, the success that Schumacher had when he came to Ferrari, it had been quite a barren run for Ferrari at Monza. The last victory before Berger was 1979 with Jody Scheckter at the wheel.
Of course, that was the year that he did, at the time, become the most recent Ferrari champion until that hoodoo was broken 21 years later by Michael Schumacher, the first of his 5 consecutive titles.
Exactly. So, we forget how, as much as how rich Ferrari's history is, how much success they had, there was a pretty big barren patch that they had sort of, after Scheckter in the late 70s, right through the 80s. There was nothing for them until Schumacher came along, obviously in 1996.
So ultimately, you could say to be wishful thinking for Vettel to join this exclusive club of first-time out victors in the red overalls. But stranger things have happened this weekend. Really, who knows if the heat could be a factor? We've seen the last couple of occasions where there has been an increase in that the warmth. Ferrari has capitalised. And Malaysia, no one saw that one coming, and then of course they took everyone by storm at Budapest just prior to that break. And it's really probably one of their last opportunities, you would think, if they do pull off the victory this weekend, to get that third one on the board for the season, because Mercedes will look very strong on paper throughout the remaining events.
Indeed, and Kimi Räikkönen as well, still winless for Ferrari this season, so it'd be nice to see him get a victory under his belt as well. But I think the team will just be happy to have 2 wins, to have had 2 wins already in 2015. But yeah, other than that, it's going to be an interesting race, and we're going to be back on Sunday, debrief qualifying, and then talk about the race a bit more in detail. So
I think, yeah, that's about all going to get through today. There's been a fair bit, of course, and there's going to be a few more little revelations, I'm sure, in coming 24, 48 hours, especially if matters proceed with the Renault acquisition there of Enstone. And we'll be sure to cover this in depth on Sunday, where we'll also, dissect the qualifying outcome.
Yeah, so from me, Jawad, Baden, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you guys Sunday.
Ciao.